male, age 38, found unconscious, heart rate 37, pressure 70 pounds, ventricular rhythm, started IV, oxygen and pacemaker, spacer, capture of and rate of 60, and blood pressure of 98/64. No history, no medication.
Are you a doctor?
No allergies to any
They were just
medication.
yelling at someone on the phone. Just collapsed onto the floor. Oh, he's in so much pain. Oh, God, please, is he going to be all right?
Mommy, what's going to happen?
Junior child, just stay here and let us help.
Why don't you just come with me and take me?
There's Laura, you're with me. Let's move to the tree and somebody get Dr. Johnson down here right now.
No.
Coming through, coming through.
Dr. Johnson to OR.
Doctor, defibrillating.
Let's go. 200. Set. Clear. 300. Clear.
Dr. Johnson to OR 3, code blue.
Wait, right here, Jesse.
360. Clear.
Hello, everyone. What you just heard was a dramatization, but in real life, this same scenario will play out over 2,500 times each and every day. My name is Dr. Harry Elwart, and I am not a medical doctor. I am a certified nutritional counselor, master herbalist, and I hold a doctorate in naturopathy as well as a PhD in health and nutrition, specifically cardiovascular nutrition. I am also the author of Let's Stop the Number One Killer of Americans Today. The operative words in the title are the words stop and today. You see, I have declared war on heart disease, and as I travel throughout the United States and conduct lectures on preventing and reversing this number one killer, I am overwhelmed with hearing real-life tragic stories like the dramatization we just listened to, and I often think to myself, what if? Well, the information I'm about to share with you over the next 30 minutes can be life-saving. I pray that you listen to this recording from beginning to end and then take action by joining me in spreading the word throughout this great country about what we can do so that no one ever has to live through the dramatization we heard at the beginning of this recording. Heart disease is a merciless killer who has no boundaries, and a fatal heart attack can happen to anyone at any time, no matter their age, no matter their occupation, no matter their status in life. Just looking recently, Damian Nash, 24-year-old running back for the Denver Broncos in perfectly healthy condition, collapsed and died in a charity basketball game. Dennis Johnson, who played with Larry Bird on Boston Celtics, collapsed and died after coaching his team and then playing a one-on-one game, and then walking outside, he collapsed and died in the parking lot at age 52. And how about John Spencer? Maybe some of you recognize him. He was an actor for West Wing. He actually died twice of a heart attack. He died on his show with a heart attack, and then tragically in real life, he collapsed and died of a heart attack. Twice to one man. Heart disease is America's number one killer and has been our number one cause of death for the past 80 years. It is a staggering financial burden with estimates as high as $2 billion per day. Half of all Americans that will die this year will die from a heart attack. To better put this disease in perspective, every 20 seconds someone in the United States will have a heart attack, and every 60 seconds someone will die from a heart attack, totaling over 1 million heart attacks each year. Oftentimes, the very first sign that there is anything wrong is sudden death from a fatal heart attack. That means there is a killer running rampant in the United States that is responsible for the deaths of 2,600 Americans every day, which is the equivalent to September 9/11 happening each and every day. Yet more time, more money, and more media exposure is spent securing our country from terrorists rather than securing our protection from this silent killer. Now, on the death certificate, a doctor might call it death by natural causes. However, I'm here to tell you, dying of clogged arteries is no more natural than being run over by an 18-wheeler. Listen to me, you can avoid it. And assuming you survive a heart attack, you are usually so afraid that you will do whatever the cardiologist recommends. Anything from an angiogram to bypass surgery. And in fact, those with advanced stages of heart disease are told a bypass is the only option. What you are not told is that you can prevent heart disease even if you're at high risk, that you can even reverse heart disease even if you've had a heart attack, and that you don't need toxic prescription drugs or life-threatening surgery to accomplish this. Now, for a real eye-opener. Heart disease is not just a man problem. It kills more women over the age of 60 than any other disease. In fact, at 500,000 women dying every year from heart disease, it dwarfs breast cancer, which claims the lives of 43,000 women. And get this, a research study in 1999 showed that 60% of our 5 to 10-year-olds already had a risk factor for heart disease, including high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or elevated insulin levels. Gee, I wonder if our fast food diet has anything to do with this. Before we can really get a grasp on just how massive a problem heart disease is, we need to understand it is one form of a much bigger problem known as cardiovascular disease. Now, cardiovascular disease can be defined as cardio, meaning disease of the heart, and vascular, disease of the blood vessels. It affects 73 million Americans, or 1 out of 4 Americans. In fact, 950,000 deaths each year can be attributed to cardiovascular disease, costing the American economy $352 billion. Now, cardiovascular disease can take many forms. One of those is hypertension. 52 million people have high blood pressure. It accounts for 45,000 deaths and costs the American economy $50 billion a year. In fact, anyone that has blood pressure readings of 150 over 90 increases the risk of dying from a heart attack by 3-fold, heart failure by 4-fold, and a stroke by 7-fold. Another form of cardiovascular disease is known as congestive heart failure. 5 million people suffer from congestive heart failure, and another 500,000 are being diagnosed every year. Another form of cardiovascular disease is stroke. Do you know that every 90 seconds someone will have a stroke, and every 180 seconds someone will die from a stroke? That's 160,000 deaths each year from a stroke. Another 750,000 Americans suffer a symptomatic stroke, and that's expected to double in the next 5 years. Another 22 million Americans suffer silent strokes. Diabetes is also a form of cardiovascular disease. It affects 23 million Americans, accounting for 70,000 deaths, and another 17 million are pre-diabetic. 70% of diabetics die of a heart attack or stroke. That can lead to another form of cardiovascular disease known as peripheral arterial disease. That affects 3 million Americans, and it leads to a lack of blood flow to the legs. In fact, that can lead to critical ischemia. 750,000 Americans have critical ischemia, resulting in 200,000 amputations each year. Those that can get a balloon stent or bypass, 30% fail within a year, 40% die within 4 years due to heart attack or stroke. 30 million men admit to having impotence. Vasculogenic impotence is a form of cardiovascular disease. And finally, sudden cardiac death is also a form of cardiovascular disease, which we need to expand upon right now. Sudden cardiac death is not a heart attack caused by clogged arteries, but by ventricular fibrillation, which is an electrical problem in which the cardiac conduction system that generates the impulses regulating the heart suddenly outputs rapid or chaotic electrical impulses, or both. The heart ceases its rhythmic contractions, the brain is starved of oxygen, the victim loses consciousness within seconds. It kills its victims within minutes. 95% die before reaching the hospital, and 70% die at home. It accounts for 300,000 deaths each year. Of those, 100,000 are athletes in perfect health, and of those, 45,000 are actual basketball players. Almost one-third of sudden cardiac arrests outside of homes and hospitals occur in fitness clubs or sports facilities, and defibrillators are becoming as commonplace as fire extinguishers. Now let's take a look at standard medical treatment and see why it might be failing. In the year 2002, 960,000 Americans died from diseases of the heart. And for 400,000 of those Americans, the first sign was the last sign. But for the other 560,000, there were symptoms which led to several types of treatment. Now I want you to remember this. Any treatment that fails to support the circulation throughout your entire body is likely to fail you and your health. But cardiovascular surgery and other conventional heart treatments like drug therapies are enormously, almost unimaginably profitable. Conventional medicine approaches heart disease primarily one of two ways, Drano or Roto-Rooter. What I mean by that is drug therapy or surgery. Now, surgery first begins with a catheterization. There are 2.3 million performed each year at a cost of $20,000 each. Next, they will remount clogged arteries or flatten deposits in the vessels with a balloon or stent. While more than 1.2 million people undergo coronary angioplasty using a balloon at a cost of $40,000 each, a recent study just published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that angioplasty did not save lives or prevent heart attacks in non-emergency heart patients. An even bigger surprise, angioplasty gave only slight and temporary relief from chest pain, the main reason it is done. The study concluded that newer drugs were far more effective. Another 1 million Americans undergo a procedure in which a metal stent is placed in the artery to open up the blocked artery. A full 30 to 50% of patients experience reblockage known as restenosis within 6 months of their initial procedure, which led to a drug-coated stent. Now a new study is showing that the drug-coated stents can lead to a stroke because of blood clotting. Finally, a third procedure is to cut away clogged sections of the artery and replace it with a new section grafted from other parts of the body. This procedure is known as coronary artery bypass graft or bypass surgery. A common side effect is cerebral dysfunction or memory loss and mental decline, and 4 to 10% never survive the operation. There are over 520,000 bypass surgeries each year. You should know that according to the New England Journal of Medicine, a bypass compared to less invasive and risky medical therapies appears neither prolong life nor prevent heart attacks in patients who have mild angina or suffer no chest pain after having a myocardial infarction or heart attack. And yet, bypass surgery alone generates over $20 billion a year. You know, there's a verse in the Bible that says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." And the first annotation in the dictionary for doctor is teacher. Well, let me make a house call right now. And let me give you an education and teach you ways in which you can prevent and reverse heart disease. We need to start somewhere, so let's begin by looking at risk factors. According to the American Heart Association, there are a number of risk factors in which you can control, like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, cigarette smoking, obesity, physical inactivity, dyslipidemia, poor kidney function. You can control these risk factors simply through your diet, your exercise program, or your nutritional supplement program. Next, we look at risk factors you cannot control. First is your age. About 4 out of 5 people who die of heart disease are over 65. Your ethnicity. African Americans, Latino, and Asians are 5 times more likely to suffer from cardiovascular disease. Your gender. Men at an early age, roughly around 55, and then women beginning at age 65 rapidly catch up. And your family history. If you have a mother, father, sister, brother, aunt, uncle who have suffered from cardiovascular disease, then it is in your genetic code, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Traditional risk factors play a major role in treatment for prevention of heart disease, but they fail to reliably predict individuals at risk of having a heart attack. In fact, recently 40 cardiologists got together to form a task force called SHAPE, Screening for Heart Attack Prevention and Education. They published a report in the American Journal of Cardiology in July of 2006. They concluded that we can prevent 90,000 deaths from cardiovascular disease and save $21 billion annually. Their guidelines called for non-invasive screening of all asymptomatic men between ages of 45 and 75 and women between ages of 55 and 75. Asymptomatic means no symptoms. Right now, a stress test can only be prescribed when a symptom shows up like chest pain, and by then, there is usually 70% blockage in the arteries. Out of the 1.3 million stress tests last year, 67% of those tested needed surgery. Out of the 1.1 million heart attacks last year, 50% resulted in sudden death with no prior symptoms. They concluded, "We hope to build new momentum in cardiology that inspires physicians to use modern technologies for the prevention of heart attack rather than using expensive technologies only to treat a heart attack, which is too late and results in benefits too little to benefit patients. What we as cardiologists practice today is mostly sick care. The future will have to be based on health care. Otherwise, the wildly rising cost of medical care will bankrupt our system." Basically, what the SHAPE task force had concluded was that early detection is critical. Even the American Heart Association is now recommending a cardiovascular screening for everyone over 20. And recently, Oprah Winfrey demonstrated the value of having a cardio screening to determine her vascular age. Of course, everybody wanted to experience what Oprah did. Unfortunately, we have heard her screening was about $2,000, a little bit out of the price range for the average American. Well, I'm here to tell you that recently new technology has surfaced called the Digital Pulse Wave Analyzer. This is an FDA-cleared medical device that takes a snapshot of your arterial elasticity, tests your heart rate, your artery flexibility, your hydration levels, and overall cardiovascular health. Best of all, it is quick, affordable, painless, and reliable. In fact, this simple non-invasive test actually replaces 7 different tests that are performed in a hospital that would cost you somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000. At the end of the 60 seconds, a simple printout comes out that, once evaluated by a DPA-certified technician, can show you exactly where you are as far as heart disease. It will actually grade you from A to G, A being excellent, G being a clinical event, and it will biologically age your arteries. You know, what's your preference? Would you like a chronological age of 30 with a biological arterial age of 60, or would you prefer a chronological age of 60 with a biological arterial age of 30? I encourage everyone who is listening to this recording to find a qualified DPA technician in your area and make an appointment to have a pulse wave analysis done. Remember, it is quick, painless, reliable, and most importantly, affordable, with the average cost being about $30. It can really be the difference between having complete peace of mind or discovering you are knocking on heaven's door. And if you find out the latter is true, well, don't panic, because now I'm going to introduce you to the discovery being hailed as the cardiovascular cure. Our story begins with the announcement in Stockholm, Sweden, on October 12, 1998, that 3 Americans had won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for discovering that the body uses a gas called nitric oxide to make blood vessels relax and widen. In fact, the Associated Press said this is a finding that can pay off in treatments for heart disease. Well, that's a pretty exciting announcement. But what everybody's really asking is, just what the heck is nitric oxide? Well, let's look into this. First of all, it was named Molecule of the Year by Science magazine in 1992. There have been over 75,000 articles in medical journals dating back to 1927 showing exactly what nitric oxide does in the human body. It is produced by the endothelial cells, or the inner walls of the arteries, veins, and capillaries, which makes up about 100,000 miles of blood vessels in the human body. It keeps blood vessels open, elastic, and functioning properly. And according to John Cook, who is a cardiologist who wrote the book The Cardiovascular Cure, most Americans simply are not producing enough nitric oxide. In atherosclerosis, plaques reduce blood flow in the arteries. This decreases oxygen supply to the heart muscle, causing chest pain or angina, and sometimes even a myocardial infarction, better known as a heart attack. Thanks to the 3 American Nobel laureates, we now understand how nitroglycerin works as an important heart medicine. Nitroglycerin was first discovered as a medicine in 1890 because workers in a dynamite factory did not suffer from angina pain while they were at work. We now know it acts as a nitric oxide donor and causes dilation or widening of the blood vessels, which increases oxygen supply and protects the heart as well as other organs from damage and cell death, and it makes the endothelium, or interior surface of the arteries, like Teflon, where nothing can stick to it, thus preventing and reversing atherosclerosis. In a weird turn of events, the discoverer of nitroglycerin was Alfred Nobel, who also set up the Nobel Prize Foundation, and though he suffered from angina, he refused to take nitroglycerin as a medicine and ended up dying of a massive heart attack. How ironic that years later his Nobel Prize in Medicine would be awarded for the discovery on just how nitroglycerin worked as a lifesaver and could have actually prolonged his life. Of course, studies now show that the use of nitroglycerin may keep you alive, however, it greatly damages the blood vessels, leading to a shortened life. Lyndon B. Johnson is a good example. As our president, he used to be seen taking nitroglycerin pills during his speeches. He died at the age of 64 of a massive heart attack. Today, nitroglycerin is only used with severe angina patients to ease their excruciating chest pain and prevent a further heart attack. What is truly amazing is our bodies have the ability to produce its own nitric oxide without taking nitroglycerin. And now let's look at what role this miracle molecule plays in our body. Dr. Jonathan Stanley, a professor of medicine at Duke University Medical Center, put it best when he said this of nitric oxide. It does everything everywhere. You cannot name a major cellular response or physiological effect in which nitric oxide is not implicated today. It is involved in complex behavioral changes in the brain, airway relaxation, beating of the heart, dilation of blood vessels, regulation of intestinal movement, function of blood cells, the immune system, even how fingers and arms move. Breaking nitric oxide's role down even further, we now know that in our blood vessels, nitric oxide actually lowers blood pressure. And for 52 million Americans, that's great news. It also improves blood flow and blood vessel diameter and prevents the formation of blood clots. In fact, Dr. Louis Ignarro, who won the Nobel Prize, says that it not only prevents blood clots from forming, but actually has the ability to melt blood clots that are currently there. In our heart, nitric oxide widens blood vessels that feed the heart, increasing oxygen supply and protecting the heart from damage and cell death. Nitric oxide also helps establish regular impulses and normal rhythm to the heart. Remember, at the beginning of our talk, we talked about sudden cardiac death, which is caused by an imbalance in the rhythm of the heart. In the immune system, immune cells release bursts of nitric oxide to kill bacteria, viral and parasitic infections. Nitric oxide is involved in the production of blood cells in the bone marrow and has been shown to increase the number of immune-boosting B and T cells. In our brain, nitric oxide transmits messages between nerve cells and is associated with the process of learning, memory, and sleeping. It can stimulate the brain and modulate many functions from behavioral to gastrointestinal activity. In impotence, nitric oxide stimulates, restores, and magnifies the natural responses of male and female genitals. Creating increased nitric oxide is the expected effect of the celebrated drug Viagra. The proper amount of nitric oxide heightens and lengthens the time of stimulation. More about this later in our talk. In inflammation, nitric oxide is a mediator in inflammation and rheumatism. Nitric oxide helps relieve pain. The drug morphine produces nitric oxide, which is the non-addictive but beneficial portion of the drug. In tumor reduction, nitric oxide reduces tumor growth and increases the immune response against the radical replication of cancerous cells by boosting the body's killer NK cells. In skeletal muscles, nitric oxide widens the blood channels leading to skeletal muscles. For those that exercise or weightlift, this means faster gains in lean muscle mass, greater strength, increased endurance, and full body muscle recovery. Now let's look at what causes a decrease in nitric oxide in our bodies. First and foremost is age. Of course, the older you get, everything goes kaput. Basically, your get up and go, got up and went. Then other things like heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, low HDL cholesterol. If you suffer from any neurological damage, if you have arthritis, suffer from allergies or ulcers, if you use alcohol or tobacco, prescription drugs, and love those trans fatty acids which are found in fried foods such as donuts and fried fish, fried chicken, and French fries. And then finally, sickle cell disease depletes our body of nitric oxide. Now here's the million-dollar question we've all been waiting for. How do you increase nitric oxide? Well, the first thing we look at is exercise. You would have to exercise 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to actually get any type of increase in nitric oxide. So that one's out. Next thing we look at is healthy diet. That's the bad news. Well, the good news is the foods that are rich in increasing nitric oxide are actually not the green things that your doctor tells you to eat. It's the actual foods that doctors tell you to avoid. Finally, Dr. Salvador Monicata, a doctor in England, discovered that the endothelium, or the inner walls of the arteries, veins, and capillaries, uses arginine to make nitric oxide. I know some of you are saying, well, what does a country in South America have to do with heart disease? No, we're not talking about Argentina. Arginine is actually one of the 22 natural occurring amino acids necessary for life. It is found naturally in dietary protein sources such as red meat, fish, and nuts. It is your body's key source of nitrogen, critical for maintaining circulatory functions. It is the least toxic of all the amino acids. In fact, 30 to 50 grams have been administered safely in clinical studies conducted at hospitals in the U.S. and abroad. In the groundbreaking book entitled The Arginine Solution, Dr. Robert Fried and Woodson C. Merrill tell us that in the field of medicine and health, it is one of the revolutions of our time. The discovery that the amino acid arginine may be the magic bullet for the cardiovascular system. How arginine opens clogged arteries, reduces the risk of heart disease, boosts potency with the natural alternative to Viagra, improves your immune system, and much more. In the book The Cardiovascular Cure, which was published in 2003, John Cook, who is one of this country's top cardiologists and is also chief of vascular medicine at Stanford Medical Center, says this: "There is magic within all of us. It comes in the shape of a molecule known as nitric oxide, a substance so powerful that it can actually protect you from heart attack and stroke. Best of all, your body can make it on its own. Nitric oxide is your body's best defense against heart disease. The body is capable of healing itself. What you do with this magic is up to you." Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is overwhelming as far as what arginine-derived nitric oxide does in the human body. Would it surprise you that there are 74,740 medically published clinical studies in some of the most prestigious journals in our country, like American College of Cardiology, Circulation, Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, and Clinical Investigation, showing that nitric oxide produced from arginine in the endothelium will lower blood pressure, lower cholesterol and triglycerides, improve diabetes, oftentimes reversing type 2 diabetes, improving sexual function in men and women, reducing blood clots and strokes, improving congestive heart failure, improving wound healing, improving kidney and liver function, improving memory, both short-term and long-term, and cognitive functions, increasing the human growth hormone, which is anti-aging. It's fat-burning, muscle toning, skin softening, energy increasing, and will improve muscle growth and performance. Now let's take a minute and talk about some of these medically published clinical studies. The first one was done by John Cook at the Stanford Medical Center, in which he fed a group of rabbits a high cholesterol diet, then treated half of them with arginine, the other half he maintained as controls. His conclusion was arginine inhibits the onset of arterial plaque in the animals studied. In fact, in his book, The Cardiovascular Cure, John Cook says this: "As nitric oxide burns off in the blood, it removes plaque with it, so it actually melts away the plaque. Arginine-derived nitric oxide can reverse atherosclerosis, preventing coronary artery disease and carotid artery disease, and thus preventing a heart attack or stroke." The next study we look at was performed by Dr. Maxwell and published by the American Heart Association. He looked at stable angina patients, and he wanted to compare quality of life in three categories: those that received standard medical treatment, or 3 months of drugs; those that received intensified medical treatment, or 3 months after a bypass; and then those received 2 weeks of arginine use. What he discovered in the role of general health, vitality, physical functioning, the role of physical, and pain reduction, that the 2 weeks of arginine was far superior than both the standard medical treatment and intensified medical treatment. The next study was done by Dr. Lerman and published in Circulation. He looked at coronary artery disease, and he showed that arginine increased coronary blood flow by 150%. And in another study performed on patients with coronary artery disease and published in Circulation, Drs. Maxwell, Zappian, and Stone proved definitively that patients that used arginine for just 2 weeks had a 33% increase in total exercise capacity. And finally, in a study that was done on patients with peripheral arterial disease or a lack of blood flow to the legs and feet, and published in Vascular Medicine, Dr. Maxwell, Anderson, and Cook showed that with as little as 2 weeks of arginine use, there was a 66% increase in pain-free walking. Now let's look at another condition in this country that is an epidemic, and that is diabetes. And let's look at the role arginine plays in preventing diabetes as well as possibly reversing diabetes. There's a doctor on the West Coast, his name is Dr. J. Joseph Pendergrass, who's a top endocrinologist in this country. In fact, just last year he won an award from the American Medical Association for his treatment of diabetic patients. Dr. Pendergrass, 10 years ago, was diagnosed with advanced stages of atherosclerotic carotid arteries. In other words, he was on his way to having a stroke, much like his father before him. Dr. Pendergrass chose not to go through the standard medical treatment of surgery and drugs. Instead, he ran into Dr. John Cook at a cocktail party, and John Cook told him about the phenomenal results he was having with arginine and his heart patients. Well, immediately, Dr. Pendergrass started taking arginine. Today, 10 years later, when Dr. Pendergrass goes for an MRI, his arteries are completely clear. And more importantly, 9 years ago, because he was having such great results with the use of arginine, he decided to put his diabetic patients on arginine. Well, he used to send 240 patients a year to see the 3 cardiologists in his area. End stage result, 70% of diabetics will die from heart failure or stroke, and many more will suffer with blindness and amputations or kidney failure. Well, since using arginine in his practice, he has sent less than 1% of his patients to see those 3 cardiologists, and in fact, they all moved out of the area. And now, if I may just get a little personal with each of you just for a moment. Let's talk about erectile dysfunction, common among baby boomers. You know what? Time magazine came out with an entire issue dedicated to sex. They showed that making love can boost the heart, relieve pain, and help keep you healthy. Well, what prevents us from having good sex? Well, according to the New England Journal of Medicine, 80% of sexual dysfunction is directly attributable to what? Nitric oxide failure. Science magazine showed that scientists proved definitively that nitric oxide translates to sexual potency. And recently, in a Stanford study, research shows that arginine can improve a woman's sexual desire and overall satisfaction. That's right. The proper amount of arginine stimulates, restores, and magnifies the sexual response in both men and women, with no negative side effects or complications common to the Viagra-type prescription drugs. So, ladies and gentlemen, to all the different conditions that we talked about today, atherosclerosis, arterial sclerosis, hypertension, diabetes, sexual dysfunction, heart disease, stroke, the solution is simple. The solution is supplementation with arginine. Now, who needs arginine? Well, anyone who suffers from any of the risk factors established by the American Heart Association for cardiovascular disease, which would include high cholesterol, high blood pressure, obesity, which is 30 pounds or more overweight, diabetes, family history of heart disease or stroke, low estrogen, and a smoker. Or anyone that has these common symptoms: chest pains, leg pains, easily winded, lacking energy, impotence, memory loss, or weight gain. Actually, there's not a person who's listening to this recording who could not benefit from the use of arginine as a supplement. In fact, I take it simply for prevention. Now, how much arginine should you take? Well, according to Dr. Leo Ignaro, who wrote the book No More Heart Disease, How Nitric Oxide Can Prevent, Even Reverse Heart Disease and Stroke, He recommends 5 grams of arginine a day. Now that would equate to about 58 pills if you were to go to a health food store and purchase arginine in the form of a caplet or capsule. However, you can also get arginine in a powder form or a liquid form. Liquid is always better because you don't have the mess of mixing it and waiting for it to dissolve. So if you can find a good arginine supplement that is in liquid form that contains at least 5 grams per serving of supplemental arginine, you're on your way to the cardiovascular cure. Now the question often comes up, well, I'm taking a half a dozen different prescription drugs for my hypertension, for my diabetes, for my arrhythmia. Can I take arginine? By all means, arginine is safe to take with cholesterol-lowering drugs, aspirin, anticoagulants, calcium channel blockers, digitalis or ACE inhibitors, beta blockers, you name it. The only thing you have to be careful for is if somebody is taking nitroglycerin, which most people are not on a regular regimen of nitroglycerin. They only take it when they need it. And if they would start taking arginine, they would never need it again. So arginine has no contraindications with any other medications out there outside of nitroglycerin. Now, as we draw to a close for this recording, it is necessary for me to give you the side effects. Much like the prescription drug ads at the end, they blast you with the negative side effects. Well, here are the side effects to taking arginine. You might want to write these down. You will have an increased energy, improved memory, increased immune system, improved sleep, increased muscle toning, loss of weight, better athletic performance, quicker wound healing, increased sexual function, and less prescription medicine. I know, those simply sound terrible. But if we may switch gears for a moment, let's talk about a condition in this country that truly is an American tragedy. And that is that African or black Americans are twice as likely to suffer from heart failure, twice as likely to die of a stroke, twice as likely to have high blood pressure, twice as likely to have diabetes, 3 times as likely to suffer an amputation, and only 22% of black American men, or 1 out of 4, will live past 75. This truly is an American tragedy, and we often said it was because of the food they ate, or the genetics, or the pigment of the skin, but now we finally know the reason why. And as the Bible says, if you know the truth will set you free. Well, in a study that was done at Ohio State University and published in Circulation just recently, Dr. Thaddeus Malinsky and his team studied the cardiovascular systems of black subjects and white subjects. And what they discovered was the cardiovascular system of black subjects have more enzymes to produce nitric oxide and can be more efficient than those of white subjects. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dr. Harry, you've been talking this whole time about nitric oxide being the cardiovascular cure. Well, if they can produce more, what's going on? Well, what he also discovered was, tragically, the black subjects did not produce enough of a nutrient to complete the process of nitric oxide production, and instead produced a superoxidant known as peroxynitrate, which increased their chances of cardiovascular disease and cancer by 5 times. He concludes by saying what is amazing is that this system has great potential to produce nitric oxide and can be corrected very efficiently at a relatively early age. What was this nutrient he was talking about? Arginine. His final conclusion was maybe someday a pharmaceutical company will come up with a drug that will produce nitric oxide. Well, Dr. Malinsky was correct about one thing, and that is I can guarantee you the big pharma cartels are working feverishly to produce a synthetic and patentable duplicate to arginine. Remember, their ultimate goal is to have every man, woman, and child taking 5 to 10 prescription drugs, and not to actually cure the diseases they are treating, just cover up the symptoms. I love what Dr. Patch Adams says as he addresses a group of his peers. Gentlemen, our duty is not just to prolong death, but to greatly improve the quality of life. I ask you, have you ever known anyone who started down the path of prescription drug use whose quality of life actually improved? Dr. Leo Ignaro, who won the Nobel Prize and went on to write the book No More Heart Disease, said it best when he penned these words: "You do not have to wait for the rest of the world to see the light and the drug companies to put new nitric oxide-based prescription drugs on the market in order to take advantage of what nitric oxide has to offer. Even if you have high blood pressure, have suffered a heart attack, or are at high risk, you can beat the odds. The power to lead an entirely new and healthier life is in your hands. Carpe diem. Seize the day. Start boosting your nitric oxide production right now. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Just what is this going to cost me? Well, listen to me. I'm going to give you two options here. Option 1 begins with a 911 call, followed by a trip in the ambulance to the hospital, which will run anywhere from $500 to $1,000, where you're met by an ER specialist who costs about $350, where he'll perform an EKG test, which costs about $366. Then he'll do a cardiac catheterization, which costs about $5,600, where you'll be admitted to surgery, and either open heart surgery or open brain surgery with an angioplasty, stent, or bypass will run anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000. And of course, if it's a double, triple, or quadruple, of course that will double, triple, or quadruple the price. Of course, you don't want to be awake during this procedure, so you'll need an anesthesiologist and the use of equipment for 7 hours, which would run about $7,000. Now we're talking 12 hours in a recovery room for about $2,900, 2 days in intensive care for about $5,200, a hospital stay for 5 days for about $9,400, and of course this isn't including the loss of salary while you're off work, medications while you're in the hospital, as well as when you leave the hospital, and sometimes people will need home health or hospice care. And for 4% of people, this also does not include complete funeral arrangements, which include programs, casket, plot services, and so on, bringing your total cost to roughly around $93,490. That's option A. Now let's look at option B. Option B is one DPA test, $30, 1 month of arginine, $75, complete peace of mind, priceless. The choice is yours. The question isn't really what is the cost. The question is, how much would it be worth to you if you could literally add years to your life and life to your years? How much would it be worth to you if you could have a healthy heart and Teflon-like arteries where no plaque ever sticks to the sides and you never had to worry about a heart attack or stroke? Well, the bottom line is, it's your health, it's your choice. Health is the natural state of the body. If you make the right choice right now, all the evidence promises that the quality of life you can enjoy into your sunset years will be rich with both mental and physical pleasures. You know, as I travel from city to city and spread the word about this cardiovascular cure, I hear heart-wrenching stories like the loving wife who recently shared with me how she lost her husband to a fatal heart attack while he was laughing and opening his gifts at his 40th birthday party. Or a loving daughter whose father never returned home from his daily run, and then she received a call to come to the hospital to sign some papers. Hearing real-life stories like these saddens me deeply, because I always ask myself, what if? What if I had conducted this lecture just 2 weeks earlier in this town? What if someone could have contacted this person just days prior? Which leads me to my final point, and that is, I need your help in sharing this vital information with as many people as possible. 2,500 people are dying each and every day needlessly, simply because they never heard. Won't you join me in spreading the word and saving lives? You know, Major General Patrick Henry Brady was awarded the Medal of Honor. On one day in Vietnam, while he was a major flying a helicopter for an evacuation unit, he used 3 different helicopters because the first 2 got shot up so badly in one day to fly 10 separate missions, all under heavy enemy fire, to save the lives of 51 fallen soldiers. When he was asked, "What's it like to be a hero?" he said, "I'm no hero. A hero is somebody who has a passionate love for other people or a cause, who really cares about other people and then puts that love and caring into action above his or her own personal well-being. That's a hero." I'm asking each one of you listening to this message to step up and be a hero. If everyone cared and nobody cried, if everyone learned and nobody lied, if everyone shared and swallowed their pride, we'd see the day when nobody died. Thank you.
Imagine